The storm rolled in with a fury that seemed to echo the turmoil in her heart. Thunder splitting the sky like the heavens themselves were weeping for her. The bride, still in her torn white gown, was bound cruelly to a weathered wooden post on the outskirts of town, her veil plastered to her tear-streaked face by sheets of driving rain, her wrists raw from the coarse rope that dug into her skin. Her family had abandoned her. Her groom had humiliated her, and the townsfolk who once cheered for her beauty now turned their backs, leaving her as a symbol of disgrace to be swallowed by the storm. Lightning cracked across the prairie, illuminating her trembling figure, and in that blinding flash, the silhouette of a lone rider appeared against the horizon. He was a cowboy, tall in the saddle, his wide-brimmed hat low against the rain, his coat whipping like the wings of a dark angel sent to defy fate. His horse pounded through the mud, its hooves striking defiance against the storm as he drew closer, eyes narrowing at the sight of injustice. Without hesitation, he swung down, boots sinking into the muck, and with a single slash of his hunting knife, the rope snapped free, her body collapsing into his arms like a broken bird finding refuge. She looked up through the veil of storm, lips trembling, and whispered, "Why would you help me when no one else would?" He tipped his hat back just enough for her to see the fierce honesty in his eyes, and with a voice rough like gravel but steady as steel, he said, "Because no woman deserves to be left out here alone. Come home with me." His words carried not just an offer of shelter, but a promise of safety, dignity, and the kind of loyalty no man in her life had ever given her before. He lifted her effortlessly, her wet gown clinging to him, and carried her to his horse, holding her close against the warmth of his chest as the storm raged on. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, drowning out the thunder, giving her something solid to cling to when everything else had fallen apart. As he swung her up onto the saddle, mounting behind her with one arm around her waist, she realized that maybe this storm wasn't sent to destroy her, but to bring her to the arms of a man who would never let her be tied down in shame again. The wind whipped her hair, the rain stung her cheeks, but inside she felt a flicker of hope. She thought she had lost forever, and with every stride of his horse through the tempest, she felt the ropes around her soul, breaking free just as surely as the cowboy's knife had cut through the bonds around her wrists. She didn't know where his home was or what the future would hold, but she knew one thing with certainty. She wasn't going back to the life that had abandoned her, because the cowboy had given her a choice, a chance, and the courage to believe in something better. And in that moment, as the storm faded behind them and the first light of dawn broke over the hills, she pressed her cheek against his chest and whispered a silent prayer of gratitude for the storm that had tried to break her and for the man who had carried her away from it, not just into his home, but into a new beginning where she was no longer a prisoner of shame, but a woman worthy of love, freedom, and a future brighter than any she had dared to imagine. Friends, if this story touched your heart, if it kept you hooked until the end, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now for more powerful cowboy love. Stories filled with emotion, hope, and unforgettable characters. Your support keeps these stories alive, so hit that like button, share with friends, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter of passion, redemption, and strength. The storm had passed by the time the cowboy's horse carried them into the valley, though the echoes of thunder still lingered in the distance like fading drums of war, and the bride, still trembling from her ordeal, clung tighter to him, afraid that if she let go, she would wake to find herself once more bound to that post of shame. But the cowboy's arm remained firm around her waist, steady as the horizon itself, his voice low as he leaned close and said, "You're safe now. Nobody's ever gonna hurt you again, not while I'm breathing." The words poured over her like a balm, and though her body was shivering from the cold, she felt a warmth growing inside, something she hadn't known in years: trust. His cabin soon came into sight, a sturdy log home built against the shelter of a cliff, its chimney already smoking as though it had been waiting for them. And when he swung her down from the saddle, her bare feet touched the earth with a trembling that was half fear, half relief. He guided her inside, laying her gently on a worn leather chair by the fire, his rough hands surprisingly tender as he draped a thick blanket across her shoulders, the scent of smoke and pine filling the air. For the first time since her wedding day had turned into a nightmare, she breathed without choking on grief. "Why did they leave you there?" he asked, crouching beside her, his gaze sharp but not accusing. Tears welled in her eyes. spilling before she could stop them, and her voice cracked as she whispered the truth. Her groom had humiliated her, called her unworthy and the family's proud. Merciless had tied her out for the storm as a symbol of her disgrace, a punishment for daring to dream she could belong. The cowboy's jaw tightened, fury flashing in his eyes, but he didn't curse them. Instead, he reached for her hand, rough calluses brushing her delicate skin, and said with quiet conviction, "They don't decide your worth. You do." No one had ever told her that before. Not her parents, not her so-called groom, not the townsfolk who thrived on her pain. Something inside her broke then. But it wasn't despair. It was the chains of shame falling away. Piece by piece, under the strength of his words, he brought her hot broth from the stove, watched her sip, his gaze never wavering, like he was memorizing her face not out of pity, but out of respect. And when she finally dared to meet his eyes fully, she saw not just a rescuer but a man who believed in her even when she did not believe in herself. Hours passed in the glow of the fire, and outside the storm had left the land fresh, the soil dark and rich as though it too had been cleansed. And when the sun finally rose, streaking the sky with colors more vivid than any she had seen before, she realized she had survived more than just a night tied to a post. She had survived betrayal, abandonment, and the cruelty of those who should have loved her. Now, standing in the doorway of his cabin, wrapped in the blanket he'd given her, she whispered into the morning air, "I don't even know your name." He stepped out beside her, the brim of his hat shadowing his face, and with a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips, he said, "Name's Colt, and you don't have to tell me yours until you're ready." She stared at him in silence, struck by the gentleness hidden beneath his rugged exterior, and felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. She wanted to tell him her name, to give him all the pieces of herself, but for now, it was enough that he had given her freedom, safety, and something she had almost forgotten existed, hope. And as the day stretched before them, as the scars of her past seemed smaller in the shadow of his strength, she made a silent vow that she would no longer be the woman left in the storm. She would be the woman who chose her own path, guided by the cowboy who had cut her loose and told her to come home with him. Friends, if Chapter 2 has gripped your heart as much as the first, don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now. Your support means everything. By subscribing, you'll never miss the next powerful chapter of courage, redemption, and cowboy love. Hit like, share this story with your friends, and stay tuned. The journey has only just begun.